What's going on, everybody? Sean Daniel with Guitar Control here, and today is a very important lesson. In fact, I think it's actually the most important lesson that you can ever have, because we're going to teach you how to build the fundamentals of chord building, so you can build any chord inside any key. So there's going to be a good amount of musical information in this video, so definitely feel free to kind of like pause it, try some stuff out, maybe come back to it if it's something that you've never, if it kind of gets over your head or something, because again, this is the stuff that once I learned this stuff and really got it down, it helped my playing really get incredibly better, almost overnight, because a lot of times when you're first starting out, you just kind of drill shapes, drill like licks, stuff like that. But once you know and understand the fundamentals behind how music works, you can make these mental leaps, which you get better at guitar without even having to practice, just because you understand, and your hands will have a more intuitive way of kind of getting around the fretboard, okay? So it's all about building chords, and every single chord that can be built really comes from the major scale and the manipulation of the major scale. So if you're bored by scales, don't be, because we're just going to go over one scale and we're going to learn how to build chords from that scale. So let's start with everybody's favorite, C major, okay? So the 8th fret on the E string is a C. We're just going to play the 7 notes of C major. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So definitely if you want to follow along just with these frets, it's 8E to 10E, 7, 8, 10 on the A string, 7, 9, 10 on the D string. Now again, really playing the shape isn't going to be super important right now for this purpose of this lesson. It's all about kind of seeing how these notes relate to each other to build chords from this scale, and how we can use this information and translate it to other scales, okay? So when everybody says the major scale is so important, the reason is a chord spelling comes from the major scale. So if we have these 7 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then that 8th one being an octave of the first one again, we can use those numbers to spell out what a chord is. A chord is just a bunch of single notes combined, maybe played at the same time, to kind of create a nice full sound on a guitar, okay? So if we take those 7 notes and we take a 1, a 3, and a 5, okay? We could spell that chord as a 1, 3, 5, and that will give us a major chord. So this 8th fret on the E string to the 7th fret on the A string to the 10th fret on the A string, 1, 3, 5. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are just all of them in order. 1, skip the 2, hit the 3, skip the 4, hit the 5, okay? So I'm really taking a note, I'm skipping a note in the major scale, I'm skipping another note in the major scale, and I end up with this 3-note chord. Another name for that is called a triad, a C major. I'm starting with a C, I'm skipping a note, skipping another note through the major scale, I'm getting a C major chord. Now, this doesn't look like a chord, right? If you see a C major chord, you probably see something like that, maybe something like that, something like that. Now, there's a lot of different ways to combine those 3 notes. That 1st, 3rd, and 5th note in the C major scale happens to be a C, an E, and a G. A lot of different ways to combine those. Any way you can combine those 3 notes will give you a C major chord, a C major triad, which can be found and combined all over the guitar knife. That's why there's not just one C major. It just depends on how you want to do it, okay? Now, again, we said there were 7 different notes in this scale, and this is true for any scale. Any of those single notes has the potential to become a chord, all right? And just how we built that first one, by taking a note, skipping the next note in that scale, taking another note, skipping the next note, we're kind of stacking these notes on top of each other to create these triads, these 3-note chords. We can start on any single note in that sequence to do the same thing. So let's start with the 2nd note, 10th fret on the E string. This is a D. If I take this note as my root note, the chord I'm going to build, or the note I'm going to build this chord into, I'm going to skip the next note in C major and play the next one. I'm going to have, this is a D, I'm going to skip the E, grab a F, I'm going to skip the A, and then, or skip the G and then grab an A. So D, F, A, that makes a D minor chord, okay? Now it can be really daunting to be like, do I need to know that like a D minor chord is a D, F, A, and an F major chord is an F, A, and a C? You really don't for the purposes of right now. Eventually this stuff will kind of become second nature, but the best thing to know is the formula for how these chords are built, and how you're just going through a scale and skipping a note in a major scale and then kind of combining it with other notes. And the main difference between these chords are going to be their class. if it's a major chord or a minor chord. I'm sure you've seen chords like A major, A minor, C major, G major, E minor, stuff like that. Major or minor, if you just see a chord that says C, that implies it's a major, by the way, in case you didn't know that. But all this stuff comes from the major scale, okay? And again, like we said, there's 7 notes. No matter what scale you're in, the numbers will always be the same. Now, what I mean by that is how we number these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That first note is always going to be a major chord in whatever key you're in. So maybe you already know how to play like a major bar chord or something like that, okay? Wherever the first note of the key is, you can apply that bar chord to. It's always going to be major. The second note in a key is always going to be minor, okay? Just like we said in C, a D, an F, and an A make a D minor. Again, not important that you memorize all the notes right now. Eventually, it'll be good to know. But the second note in a key turns into a minor chord, always. When you do that, take a note, skip a note, take a note, skip a note, take a note to make that 3-note chord. The third note in a key also always becomes minor, okay? So in the key of C, where we have a C, a D, and an E, it's just the letters of the alphabet, no sharps or flats. C, D, E, let's start with the first 3. C major, 1 is always going to be major. 2, D, minor, 2 is always minor. 3, E, minor. That's why in a lot of songs you've probably seen like a C major to an E minor, maybe to a D minor, to a C. Those chords will always sound good together because they exist in the same key. We're building them through this key. So to kind of continue on this formula, the 4th note in a key always becomes major. C, D, E, F. F is the 4th note in C major. You've probably seen songs with like F major and a C major in them together. The 5th note in a key always becomes major. The 6th note in a key always becomes minor. Okay, so the main chords in any key, 1 through 6, go major, minor, minor, major, major, minor. I think an easier way to remember that is the 1, 4, and 5 of any key are major chords. The 2, 3, and 6 become minor chords. Again, 1, 4, and 5 is major, 2, 3, and 6 is minor. That's a really important thing to remember. However you want to remember that. You can think of like 1 plus 4 is 5. Those are the major ones. 2 times 3 is 6. If you can kind of group those chords together in your mind, then it'll start to kind of unlock the fretboard and you can kind of see these, the relationship between chords being really helpful. So, if we just go through the chords in the key of C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, those are the notes, we can play what's called a chord scale, which we just play the chords in order. We start with C, 1, C major, D, 2 is minor, 3, E, E minor, 4, F, F major, 5, G, G major, 6, A minor, okay? Now, those are the 6 main chords in any key. Now, you could cheat and use a capo to kind of just use those 6 chords, those same 6 chords in every key, but the point of this lesson is to be able to find those chords in any key, all right? So let's just kind of move this to a different spot. Let's do the key of A. A major, that same hand shape that we did. Now, if you don't know how to get the major scale, we've got other videos on that. Really important just to kind of be able to find how to make the major scale because everything comes from the major scale. Even though if it just sounds like a stupid, boring scale, it is not. It is so important to kind of have an understanding of how this works because it really helps you with absolutely everything you'll ever do on guitar. So, I don't even have to know the notes of A major to start making chords out of them. I can just know that whatever note this is, in the key of A, right? This is A. The 1 is going to be an A major. I can play an A major bar chord. I can play an A major open chord. I can take a little piece of this chord maybe. A lot of different ways to do it. I know that the second note is going to be minor. So I can kind of figure that out. A whole step away from A is B. So B minor would be my chord. You can do bar chords. A lot of different ways you can do that. The third note, whatever that is, also going to be minor. It happens to be a C sharp. Again, you don't even have to know it because once you start to see the distances, the intervals between these notes, it'll start to make a lot more sense, all right? The 4th note is major, 5th note, major, 6th note, minor. So a chord scale in A would be A major, B minor, C sharp minor, D major, E major, F sharp minor, all right? Now, there are an unlimited way of playing those chords around the neck, but it's good to just kind of be able to see how those are made. Now, another way, another approach to this, to kind of see how they work in relation to each other, is to start arpeggiating them, all right? And arpeggios when you just play them one note at a time. You can do that within a chord shape, like this A major bar chord we did. We could just play it one note at a time. That's one way to arpeggiate it. I think arpeggiating through a scale shape is a little bit more valuable perspective-wise when you're first starting out. So like we said before, there's the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I take that 1, I skip the 2, go to the 3. 1, 3, skip the 4, go to the 5. 1, 3, 5. That is an A major arpeggio, okay? And once you just kind of think of it that way, it just becomes a shape. I'm starting with my middle finger, I'm going down a string, backwards 1 fret to get what's called a major third. All right, 1, 2, 3, the third of the major scale is a major third. And then I'm going 1, 2, 3 frets higher from the 4th fret to the 7th fret. So that's a major arpeggio, and I can move this shape anywhere. Now, if I wanted to arpeggiate all the chords in this key, I can root my first one here. And remember, I know that the 4 and the 5 in this are also major chords, so I can count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can make this my new root and do that same major arpeggio, because I know it's always going to be major. The 4 is always major in a key. The 5, same deal. I can also make that major. So I can do all the chords in this key, all the major chords, by going 1, 3, 5, 1. And it's always going to work together. And now I can start combining them instead of just playing them in order. A lot of different things that you can do once you realize that. Now, a minor arpeggio is going to be slightly different. Like we said, the second note in a key is going to turn into a minor chord. So now if we take this note, the 7th fret on the E string, and we skip the next one in that sequence, we're going to end up with a 5th fret on the A string, okay? So here to here. Now if we skip another note, we're going to end up right here, the 4th fret on the D string. So I could arpeggiate a minor chord by getting 7E, 5A, 4D. In fact, I can play those all three at the same time to get a minor chord, but we're just making an arpeggio out of it, all right? Now I can start combining those with the first one we did. Here's the major one into the minor one. Major, minor. Another way to think of a different way to play this B minor arpeggio, the 7th fret is a B. I can think of this as my root note with my pointer finger and go a minor third higher to the 10th fret. The distance between the 7th fret and the 10th fret on the same string is the same exact thing as the distance between the 7th fret and the 5th fret down a string. See? B, D, B, D. Makes no difference, just a different perspective of the same thing. So I can make a minor arpeggio like that, and then grab the next note there. So 7E, 10E, 9A, minor, major, minor. Now I can do the same thing with a major on the same string, because the difference between a major and a minor chord arpeggio, however you want to look at it, is they're the same 3 notes, except the minor chord has what's called a flattened third, okay? So let's go back to that B minor. There's this third. Flattened means subtracted 1 semitone lower. So if we unflatten this, we would get a 4-note reach. So this is a B minor arpeggio. If we just take this and extend it 1, B major. This is the same as this. So we are kind of skipping all over the place, but it's just because there's a lot of different ways to approach how to build chords from a scale. These are all different ways to do it. Now, again, I know you've already memorized this. The 1, 4, and 5 are major in a key, and the 2, 3, and 6 are minor in a key. And now the title of this video said we were going to teach you how to play kind of like any chord in any key. And there are a lot of different chords. I'm sure you've probably seen stuff like, you know, like a major 7 chord or a F sharp major 9 chord, something like that. Again, those are all, it seems really daunting at first. I remember because I was there. Where like I have to remember all these different shapes, like a F sharp major 9 chord. it almost seems impossible to remember what that is and then remember like a D major 9 chord. But if you think of building a chord through a scale, the name of the chord is actually giving you instructions for what you need to build that chord. So let's take the next progression. So far we've just done major and minor triads. The next thing we do would be introduce 7 chords, okay? Now all that means is we're adding the 7th note in to the chord from the scale. So if we go back to C major, and we made a C major chord by getting the 1, the 3, and the 5. Now if we add a 7 to that, 1, 3, 5, the 6 would be here, the 7 would be here. 1, 3, 5, 7. If I combine those notes, I get a C major 7 chord. It's a C major, and I'm adding the 7th note from the major scale, thus giving me a C major 7. Now if I wanted a C major 9 chord, okay? The thing that you have to remember is to make a major 9 chord, you have to have a major 7 chord first, and then you're adding the 9 to it. Kind of gets a little confusing at first. Like if you've ever seen like an add 9 chord, there's different ways to do it. Like a C add 9 chord is where you take a C chord and you add the 9th note. So if we just go through the C major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If I added this note to a C chord, I would get a C add 9 chord. I'm adding it. The difference between that and a major 9 chord, if we arpeggiate it, we have to go through the 7 to get to the 9 first. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay? So if we skip the 7, go right to the 9, that's add 9. If we have that 7 on the way to the 9, that's a C major 9. Okay? So the important thing to remember is that the name of the chord is helping you determine which notes you need to build it in absolutely any key, okay? And that's why those numbers are really important, because you don't necessarily have to know, like, okay, in the key of B flat, like the 1 is a B flat, and then you know the 2 is like a C, and the 3 is a D, and the 4 is an E flat, 5 is an F. It's not so much important as remembering all those things, but remembering how to make the major scale and being like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4, whatever this is a major chord. So I need to take this note, I need to make it a major chord or an arpeggio somehow. Whichever one of those is going to be more helpful to me. Now this just happens to be an E flat, so E flat major is the 4 chord in the key of B flat. But thinking about those and trying to memorize all those right away is a little bit of a challenge. It'll come for sure as long as you're thoughtful about it. You'll start seeing the similarities, but it's really more about building chords through a scale, thinking about which number a particular chord is occurring on a scale. And that's really going to help you to open up the entire fretboard to see the connections. And like, okay, a 1, a 4, and a 5. If I have a 1, a major chord on the low E string, and I want to go just down a string and make a major chord, that's a 1 to a 4. I'm sure you've already played that in songs already. Like if you play like a G major chord to a C, my root note is here, it's straight down a string. That's going a 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So G to C to D is a 1, 4, 5. And that's going to be true in any, so yeah, whatever the 9th fret of the E string is. I don't even know what this note is. I'm going to play a 1, go down a string, 4, 5. Okay, so these relationships between chords is the best way to build any chord from a key. And it all comes from the major scale, slowing down, being thoughtful, being super confused at first, but then eventually just kind of seeing how this is practically used in songs, how a song will move through a progression, a group of chords sometimes. And once you just start thinking of it, how they pertain to a scale, 1, 4, and 5 is major, 2, 3, and 6 is minor, etc., your playing is going to get a lot better. Now, one thing we haven't talked too much about is that 7th note of a chord, of a key, right? So like in the key of C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all right? Now, there's kind of a special chord that goes there. It's called a diminished chord. And we're not spending a lot of time on that in this lesson because you won't commonly see that in a lot of popular genres. It's definitely a chord worth talking about. And, you know, check out some of the other videos because we talk about it a little bit more there. But, like in the key of C, you don't often see a B diminished chord depending on the genre of music you're in. It's definitely a worthy chord. You should look into it. But I think the best place to start is to think 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor, how those relate to each other, how you can get from one to another, switch to another through either chord shapes, whether it's open shape, whether it's bar chord, and arpeggios, no matter how fretboard spanning those arpeggios are. definitely something you want to start looking into. So, a lot of information for one lesson, but definitely if you have questions, hit us up in the comments, and maybe even give us ideas for future videos you might want to see, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Thanks a lot. So if you got that, and now you know exactly how to make any chord from any key, you're in luck, because now you can use that to practically see the connection between these chords within a key and a lot of these other videos that we have for you to click around and learn from. So again, thank you for watching, and check out some of the other vids.